Hey guys, I know you wanted me to do a demo on the retro graphics tutorial, so let's have a go. Let's get rid of our cube and let's make some text. So I'm going to create some text here and we'll do Buffalo State. I'll make this like the tutorial I did in class the other day. And let's look a little bit closer here. Let's rotate this guy. So let's go RX90 and let's extrude that a little bit. So let's come over to the settings, geometry, and we'll extrude it just a little bit, and then we'll also make it a little bit more round. But before we make it round, let's look at this straight on and fix the kerning and fix the font too. Let's not use that font. Let's go over here and use Century Gothic Bold. We'll use that guy instead. Alright, then let's go into edit mode, move that cursor around, and option, and let's tweak that a little bit over. Move that over, move that over. I'm not going to worry about it too much, just try to make it look a little bit better. That's good. Alright, rotating it out, let's give it a little bit of roundness. So let's come over to bevel and just say, alright, let's give it a bit more round. Qualities, there we go. And like I did in class, I want this to have like a chrome sort of quality. So looking straight on again, let's go ahead and align our current view. Let's go to align active camera to view, and then let's zoom that camera out. So I'm selecting the camera, and then I'm going to just zoom it out a little bit. And then I'm going to hit G and line it into place. It might need to be rotated. I don't need this light, so I'll delete that. Alright, let's switch over to shading and look through the camera. Let's make sure that while I'm doing this, screencast keys are on so you can see what I'm doing. And let's just move this over. And while I'm in this view, let's move that over a little bit more. Over here, thank you. Good. Okay. And I don't need this view, so let's go over there. Let's select this. Let's make a new material for it. We'll call it Chrome. Thought it would sound better with my headphones off, but no, I don't like that either. So let's turn up the metallic, so that way we get a metallic sort of shape, but it doesn't ever look very good until we do some other stuff to it first. So let's turn down the roughness, so that way it's a lot more shiny, and but not turn it down all the way, just mostly all the way. But then we need something for it to reflect, and if we just look at it through the render view, it's only reflecting gray, which is not very helpful. So let's come over to our friend polyhaven.com and let's go to HDRIs. And what I want is like a 1980s style airbrush chrome look. So let's go to outdoor. Let's go to we want some sort of nature, like with a high bright contrast. So yeah, with a deep blue sky and a brown background, something like this one. Let's try this. Quantani Moonrise. We don't need it to be super high resolution. We'll go with the 4K one for now, and we'll save this in our documents project. Let's come up to my H drive. March 2025 is the year that we are in, and let's call this Shiny and Chrome, and save that. And before we go any further, we'll save our Blender project as well. So March 25, Shiny and Chrome, we'll call this guy Chrome _ version 01.blend. Alright, let's change our world settings. We can do that over here in the world settings, or we can do that over here in the shader settings. I'm going to do it in the shader settings because it's better. under the background setting here, we're going to add an environmental map texture. And that texture we're going to use is the moonrise texture. Plug that in, plug that into the color. So then we see it in the background here. And we can roll around and you can see that amazing landscape. Polyhaven is in South Africa, so this might be somewhere in that part of the world. It's pretty amazing. But we actually don't want to see the background in our render. So we're going to turn over to our render settings, go to Film, Internal, and Transparent. So that way we just see the reflection of it on the text. And then let's go back from World to Object. Make sure we have this object selected. And let's adjust the roughness. And so you can see as I turn down the roughness, we see more of that background. Just tweak it a little bit there. I don't want to see that background too much. But I also want to control that background. Maybe there's different parts of it that are more blue, or I can adjust that setting. So back in the world settings for this shader, I'm just going to make sure I select this and hit Control T. And if nothing happened, I'm going to go over to my preferences and go over to add-ons and make sure that Node Wrangler is turned on. So now that Node Wrangler is turned on, I can select this and hit Control T, and then I get some mapping settings. What's useful about this is I can spin this world around once I plug this in. So as I drag this around on the Z-axis, you can see the world is sort of rotating around behind it. So I can choose an area that might have more sky, or maybe not, but you get the idea. So that way I can just adjust that a little bit more. I just want brown at the bottom and blue at the top. But you can see that it's not very blue, so we could probably adjust those settings. We can change the strength of the world to how much it's reflecting, but we can also change, let's send that back to 1, the settings here before the color goes to the input of the background. We can do things like we can go to color, make some adjustments. That is, I'm hitting Shift A and color, and let's go to hue and saturation. And so if I turn up the saturation, you can see the effect that that's having. If I turn down the value, you can see it makes it darker. And if I change the hue, you can see what that's doing as well. So I'm going to leave it like that, but I think I'm going to adjust the curves a little bit too. So I'm going to go to color and go to RGB curves and plug that in. And so let's make let's just see if we can get more contrast out of it. Something along, yeah, there we go. Okay, that's close to what I'm looking for, but we might want to tweak it a little bit more too. Maybe we want the brown further to the bottom, so we can use this rotation on the other axes as well, such as X. So if I rotate X down, you can see what the effect that that's having. Very useful. Okay, good. Let's switch back to the object, and we can adjust the roughness if we want it to be a little bit. There we go. And so then we can do other things over here, like turn up a sheen. A sheen is kind of nice. So if we turn that up and then change the roughness on it, you can see the effect that that's having. It kind of makes it glow or not glow, depending on the look that you're looking for. And you can change the tint of that too. So if you wanted it to be a different tint, go for it. Play around with it, see what you can get. Something to keep in mind too, I don't have ray tracing turned on. I'm just using Eevee. But if I turn on ray tracing, sometimes that can add to the effect, sometimes that can take away, depending on what you're looking for. Most of the time, ray tracing is great for bounce light and so forth, but sometimes you can see what it's doing to the quality of the render there. So if I turn down roughness all the way, it's okay. And sometimes this also depends on your GPU. If we look at it from this angle, and notice that we have an edge on it with ray tracing turned on. I guess we have it there on the other side too, but notice also we get proper reflections where the object is self-reflecting with ray tracing. The last time I did this, I did it on the GPUs, on the lab computers. I'm not a big fan of that. I kind of like this look better. It's more of what I'm trying to go for. Okay, good. Alright, so what else can we do here? Well, let's add a compositor. So I'm going to change this from the shading viewport to the compositing viewport. I'm going to use nodes. And let's add an alpha over, so that way we see black behind everything. So I'm going to look for an alpha over, adjust, where are you? color, set alpha, alpha convert, where are you? I'm just going to search for it. Alpha over, there we are, color mix, okay. So plug it in, and we're not going to see any changes until we tell the compositor to use it when we're looking through the camera. So I'm going to come over here and say, the compositor, use it while we're looking through the camera, or use it always, it's up to you. Now, the reason why everything is white is because we have white right here, and the compositor, the render, is going behind the white. And I know this is fun for students from the Adobe world. This is on top, this is on bottom. You're welcome. So if I plug the render to the top, then white will be behind the render. So if we want that to be black, just go to black. And again, this will only work if under the film settings, transparent is turned on. Otherwise, we're going to see the beautiful landscape behind it. Okay, cool. All right. And then it's in here, this compositor, that we can add other things to this render, such as, let's go to filter and glare. And then if we have the threshold change, you can start to see where we get that super cool 80s style render. And notice there's an angle offset here, so we can rotate that, and color moderations depending on what we're trying to do. That adds the sort of rotating color, and you don't get a real consistent look. You have to do a render to see this, but you can see how it's changing the color modulations here. So it's very 70s. If you change the quality to high, you might get something that's more reliable. You might also flicker, depending on what you're trying to do. You can change the fade. Normally, if you change the setting and you don't like where it's going, just hit escape before you let go, and then it'll just go back to its default, or back to where it was, rather. You can change the amount of iterations as well, depending on what you're trying to do. Again, you got to play around with it. Turn down the threshold, and we get more of those sparkles. And if you need more sparkles, we could actually adjust the color as it's coming out of this render right here. So if we wanted to go to filter, color rather, and adjust, and let's go to somewhat mix, where it should be under adjust, RGB curves. So if we wanted to add like more contrast to our render, we can adjust the curves that are coming out of it, and you might get something that's more along the line of what you're looking for. That's pretty good. Maybe more contrast. There we go. And be sure to do a test, because we only see a little bit of the glare right now, but if I tap F12, we'll get the composite, and now we actually see what those renders are looking like in the final render. They're a little bit more accurate than when we get the preview right here. And sometimes what I do is I add another glare to that. So I'll just duplicate this, Shift D, and change this one to either bloom or fog. So bloom gives us this wonderful huge glow, and we can change the threshold so it's not so intense, and then we get this pretty great glare, keeping the quality at high. Sometimes though, the low quality might be actually what you're looking for. Instead of bloom, there's also just a fog glow. It's slightly different, but depending on what you're trying to do, it might be more along the line of what the kind of glare that you're looking for. I like the bloom. I'm going to turn that down really far, and also at any time, if you want to see what these two are doing, you can hit M, and that mutes the node, so that way it's turned off temporarily. When that's turned off, it won't render either, so that way you can just mute it, but also not have to delete it. I like the little line that goes through it to tell you it's being bypassed. Also, all of this can be animated. Notice that I can make the balloon bigger or smaller, and I can change the threshold. So this can add for some fun effects later. I'm going to keep the threshold up here for now. All right, and I'm still in the shading tab, and I like to stay in the shading tab because I use these nodes a lot. Pay attention to whether or not you're using the compositor, or you're using the shader editor, or you're using, and inside of the shader editor you have the world editor, as well as the line style. Don't use the line style too much these days. All right, so that's the world, and then let's go back to the object, and this is the object. I'm not using any special textures beyond that HDRI. All right, so to make this look a little bit more like the 1980s style graphics, let's add a mesh. Let's add a plane, and I'm going to move that plane over on the x-axis, GX, and let's scale that guy up, S, so it's nice and big, and then let's move it down. Notice the shadow and everything is pretty cool, but that light that we're seeing on this is coming from the HDRI, so that's where the shadows and everything are coming from. In fact, if I come over here to film, we turn off transparent, we see that's where the light is, and it's coming from that scene. So that's one of the advantages of HDRI, is it actually lights up your scene, which is very useful. But for now, we don't actually want this plane to look like this. What I'm going to do is let's go back to flat shading, and let's go to edit mode, and let's right click and subdivide. And let's subdivide this guy a bunch of times. We'll just go up to 20, maybe 30 times. I want a grid, right? Because grids were very popular back then. And so then to make this an actual like wireframe grid, let's come over to our modifiers, let's add a generate, and let's add a wireframe. The wireframe by default creates these coffers, which is not the look we're going for, so we're going to change the thickness of it. 0.001 should be close to the grid style that we're going for. Now, this grid needs a material. Let's turn on transparent again. Which this is pretty cool, but not really the look we're going for. So let's select this guy and give it a new material. We'll call this material grid. And let's turn up roughness really far, and let's make the color of it black. I'm going to turn off overlays so I can see the effect I'm having on this thing. And now let's come over to emission, and let's turn up the emission by 1. And let's turn up the color to purple or something. There we go. So now we've got this sort of neon. Let's turn the emission down a little bit to like 0.5, so it's not so strong. 0.6. There we go. Excellent. So now we have like a glowing neon grid. We have the Buffalo State chrome text, and that's just looking all right. And if we come back over to the compositor, we can change a few things. Notice that this compositor is affecting everything. If I mute it temporarily, this is what it looks like without the RGB curves, and this is what it looks like with it. So it's making a nice little difference. And then let's do a test render to see how that's compositing together. Yeah, that's pretty much what we're looking for. Good. All right. So now let's make a simple animation, and let's have a couple other things happen. So before we go any further, let's hit save, and let's see what our scene is looking like. Let's turn our overlays back 1. We have so far, and I've been going for 18 minutes so far, let's duplicate this guy. So I'm going to hit Shift D, and so I made a duplicate of this. Let's make this the growy text. And so this is like the Superman effect. Let's turn off the bevel on this one. And then let's do a larger extrude, so like this sort of thing here. And so we're going to have like the text do this fly backwards, stretch into the text sort of effect for our animation. Okay. Now this needs a material, so let's come back over to our, we are in our shading tab, but it needs to be like, we don't want this to be our, let's go to the shader editor. We don't want this to be chrome, we want this to be like a glowy sort of effect. So we're going to disconnect on the large text here, the chrome material, we'll give it a new material, and we'll call this Superman. And what we're going to do is make a sort of a wiry sort of material. We don't want the fills to be on for this either, so what we're going to turn on is we're just going to turn off none. So that way the text doesn't have a front or a back. Okay, good. So what else can we do here? Well, let's add some noise. So I'm going to go to texture, and let's add some noise texture. And then let's plug that up to the alpha level. So we're going to go to factor and alpha. And so you can see what the noise is doing is adding like an alpha level to this. And so if we change the size of it, you can start to see that alpha noise in the scene. But I don't really like where that's going, so let's go to converter and color ramp. And then let's change that to constant. So this way we can just use either an on or off of noise. And so you can see how it sort of eats up that material. Very useful. And you can change the roughness. You can change the detail of that texture, and that's what it's doing to it. But remember, node wranglers, we can stretch out this texture. So with noise texture selected, I'm going to hit Control T, and then I'm going to scale it out on the y-axis. It looks like is what I want to do. So I'm just going to, nope, yeah, well, yeah, that's the look I'm going for. I'm just trying to make like this stretchy sort of line sort of shape here. Good. What does the camera see? Yeah, so see, it creates this really strong perspective effect, and that's what I'm going for. But I don't want this to be just a diffuse. I want it to be glowing, of course. And so let's use this alpha level and change the base color. We'll keep the base color white, but turn the roughness up all the way and almost all the way. And let's change this to like a blue glowing sort of color like that. So now it's like this glowing energy sort of shape here. Then what we'll do is we'll animate this moving forward. And we can do other things to this, like if we were to move the location of this mapping, you can see how it's going to like make it sort of a jittery text, and that might be kind of cool to animate that later. But for now, we'll just keep it as it is. Distort also does some fun stuff to it. You can see what it looks like out here. Pretty boring. But in camera, it looks like this. Okay, cool. All right, so let's do some basic animations to all of this. Let's split our screen here and make a timeline. All right, so let's take this shape here and let's shrink it backwards. So at about 40 seconds or 40 frames into our animation, the extrude on this is going to be 0. So it'll extrude down into nothing. And so we'll set a keyframe for that. And then at the first frame, the extrude is going to be way out here. So I'm sort of animating backwards. So then we'll set a keyframe. So it's going to go like that. But we kind of don't want it to move just to the center. We also want it to move on this one axis up here. So what we're going to do is, if we turn on our tools over here, we'll animate it. So we want it to be about right here when it ends. So we're going to set a keyframe for the growy guy's position. So we'll set keyframes for the positions, and then up here we'll move it out here in this direction. So that way, as it's shrinking, it's also heading towards the text. So we'll set new keyframes just for that Y position right there. So that goes like that and becomes that sort of object like that. And then from the camera's point of view, it looks like that sort of effect is what we're going for. So it kind of reveals the buff state text. Kind of cool. So that's sort of the effect we're trying to go for here. And one thing that'll be very helpful is we'll turn on a little bit of motion blur, and that will make for a nice effect as well. So if we do a quick render of that, that's the sort of effect that's going to happen. So after all the compositing and everything, it's got really nice motion blur, and it renders super fast because we're just rendering in Eevee. Okay, but what we don't want is we don't want the text Buffalo State to be there before it's come together from the energy thing that we're doing. So what we need to do is animate the alpha level. So you can see here is the alpha level, so we can have it fade in or fade out. And so we'll just have it be completely faded in by frame 40. So I'll hit I, and then on the first frame, we'll have it animate over about 20 frames. So here, and we'll roll our mouse over it and hit I. So now and you only see the keyframes when you have the node you're editing actually selected. So if we turn off our overlays here, we'll see the buff state words appearing, but they're not there beforehand. And if you're doing this in flat shading, you won't see the fade come and go. So keep that in mind. You only see this in the rendered or the material preview mode. Good. So we can hit play and see that almost in real time. Now let's add a little bit more complexity to this movement, and we can do that by just moving the camera. So if we move the camera, let's just select the camera here. Let's split our view. I split the view in the old-fashioned way because I've been using Blender since the 60s, since people made animations like this, since the 1860s, that is. So let's select the camera, and then let's just move the camera a little bit backwards. So I think I want the shot to end about right there. So I'll set keyframes for the position, and mostly we'll just be animating it on the y-axis. And so then at the beginning, we'll have the camera moving a little bit further out. So we'll have the camera about right here. All right, we'll set another keyframe for it. So that way the camera will be moving backwards as the other text is moving in. And it's going to be a little bit hard to see. Let's look at it in wireframe mode. You might get a better idea what that animation is going to look like. It's pretty good. Nice and fast. And then usually what we do to make it like a retrographic style is we go back to our compositor and we start taking advantage of some of the glow effects that we had earlier. So this bloom effect that's very weak. When the Buffalo State logo appears, it's not really a logo, when the Buffalo State appears, let's have it glow like really big, but we also want it to like calm down as the motion, as it sort of comes into focus. So we're going to set a threshold keyframe of 0.6 for right here, around frame 60. And then I'm going to move a little bit forward so that when the Buff State text is appearing, the threshold is going to be much lower. So we'll have I right here. And so that'll have the effect of the glow getting really intense and then settles down. But that threshold is applying to everything, so keep that in mind moving forward. That could work against us. And then something else I might want to have happen is our streaks, our glary streaks. We might want those to have a little animation to them. So let's control the angle of them. So, and they're kind of hard to see here in this animation, but we'll set a keyframe so that they do a little spin while we're moving. So I'm going to set a keyframe here, and then so at the end of the animation it'll land here, but then as we're moving towards it, it'll do like a fun spin. So we'll just rotate that the other direction about 360 degrees or so. So that way, as the animation is coming in, the glare does a spin at the same time. It's kind of hard to see, but it's those little subtle differences that make a big difference. And something else we could try as it fades in is we could make the text even brighter by turning up its emission. So if I come over to the shader editor, select our text, and notice that it has its own emission setting as well. And we can turn that emission up to white, and that'll cause our glare effects to get even stronger. But we don't want it to be there the whole time. So when it fades in, notice it's going to do this wonderful glare thing, and then we want that to go out. So let's say, all right, when it gets about to here, the strength will be almost 7, but then it'll quickly drop down to nothing. So that way it'll have the effect of appearing, being very bright, and then being right there. Okay. All right. So we're almost a half hour into this, so I think that gives the idea. Let's render this guy and see what that's going to look like. And we'll just do a quick FFmpeg render. We'll put it in our folder here. Shiny and Chrome. We'll call it render test. And let's make sure our output is an H.264 in an MP4. And I'm going to render it at 50% resolution just so it renders very quickly. It'll already render pretty quick, but this should render even faster. And normally when we do a production output, we don't render an FFmpeg, we'll render like a professional file format like an OpenEXR or something along that line. Okay, so we're going to render it frames 1 through, let's go through 80. That seems to be the end of the animation. Always hit save before you render, and we'll render the animation. And I also recommend switching this to flat shading while you're rendering. In don't panic if you don't see your full render in the render window. It's not showing you what's being composited during the render process. Let's go look at that file where that's loading. I'll pull that up. Shiny in Chrome. Okay, we're done. Let's see that file. Here we go. So that is a quick render, low resolution, but you get an idea of what those glares are doing and those sparkles, and it sort of hits the mark. I don't like how the streaks are flashing around. I might have to do something to stabilize those, but that more or less hits the job that we're trying to do here. And that's all there is to it. So I'm not using any special plugins except for a few things that help me with my nodes, and yeah, so have fun, and thanks for watching and all that kind of stuff. I will talk to you soon in class.